All right, I want to welcome to the next of the 67 steps, continuing along here. Thank you for being reliable and continuing on. Remember, that's part of this whole game, how this thing works. It's not just what you're listening to, it's the fact that you're continuing on. So thank you. So today, the topic is Stoic versus Epicurean, Arnold's 1,000 reps, Apache cold showers, and the Spartan whipping post. Why you have to develop thick skin. A lot of words there, a lot to cover. Those of you know one of my favorite book series is that I was given at 16 years old. You might have heard this in my TED Talk. Was from my grandfather Charles. And there was a saying that's always stuck with me. A nation is born stoic and dies Epicurean. A nation is born stoic. Well, what does that mean? Well, ancient philosophers were divided into different groups. One group was called the Stoics. Stoicism, you may have heard of this. Stoics basically believed that you must forego present pleasure in the hopes that you'd get something better. In a sense, they were the investors of ancient history, philosophically. And then you had the Epicureans, and Epicureans followed this Epictetus guy, or Epicurus, I think was his name. And he basically said that humans should live for now, that you should eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. You hear that even reflected in modern world. There's this, you hear it in, hip hop. It's called YOLO. You only live once, right? Now, the question is, which of those should you follow? And again, we've talked about the 500-year-old archaic mind. I cannot tell you what is right or wrong. This is not a black and white issue. Of course, there's some truth to both, right? Certainly there is something to, if you're only investing in the future and you're not living in the moment, you never know how long you're going to live, right? You must enjoy the moment. George Mumford taught Michael Jordan to live in the moment. But what I can tell you, if I can't tell you which one's right or wrong, I can tell you Newton's third law. For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. So what is the reaction that you'll get if you live a life that's Epicurean for the moment? My advice to you, it's probably not what you think. The Stoic life, the life filled with some toughness, some thick-skinned, is probably going to give you what you're looking for. So let me explain. Arnold's 1,000 reps, Apache cold showers, and the Spartan whipping post. Let's start. These are some examples. So Arnold Schwarzenegger came from a mentality as a bodybuilder, and I wrote an article about this. It's the Hillary Clinton article. I'll read this to you. It's I think you'll get some value. I just wrote that. You might have seen it on my site, and it has a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he talks about when he was young. Bodybuilding, he had little calves. Bodybuilders obviously want to have big muscles everywhere, so he had these smaller calves. And he was like, I'm not getting what I wanted. I want big calves. So let me read to you what happened. I'm just going to read right from his words. He talks about, he heard of this idol, Reg Park. He said, when I first came to America in 1968, I didn't have big calves. In 1969, I visited Reg Park at his home in South Africa and stayed with him for a while. He would get up at 5 a.m. to train. So Reg, being my early idol, I also got up at 5 a.m. to train with him. The first thing he did every session was 10 sets of calf raises. His calves were a huge 20 inches. I looked at them and said, I want calves like that. So he put 500 pounds on the machine and started his first set. I screamed, 500 pounds, I'll rip my heel. He told me, when you walk with one foot in mid-stride, the other foot is supporting 250 pounds, so both feet can support a 500-pound workload. To really make the calves grow, you have to go up to 1,000-pound calf raises. No way, I said, but he listened to him. In 1 year, my calves grew 2 inches. They grew so quickly that some people began to say I had gotten calf implants. So what does that have to do with Stoics versus Epicurean? Well, most of us have grown up with a lot of technology. We've become slowly but surely weaker, softer, I should say, more sensitive, not willing to grit it out. The Stoics, though, believed in toughen up. I said this. I want to read you something I wrote. I usually don't read, but this sums it up best. I wrote an article some of you might have read. It's a little bit, I talked about it on my TED Talk, but I wrote an article on my Facebook. And let me just read this to you. I live in Hollywood, the city where dreams are made, or should I say the city of broken dreams. For years, my neighbor on the right was Russell Brand and Katy Perry, and my neighbor on the left was Cameron Diaz. Why did these two celebrities get their dreams instead of the 1 million struggling actors and musicians who left Hollywood empty-handed? I asked myself that question when I was still a teenager. I wanted to be someone who got what they wanted. We all want something. The first answer I got came in the form of a mental framework I memorized. A fancy way of saying a quote I memorized. It was from the famous Columbia historian Will Durant. A nation is born stoic and dies Epicurean. Stoics were people who believed in sacrificing the now to get something better in the future. Epicureans lived for pleasure. They believed in YOLO. You only live once, so get what you can without thinking about tomorrow. Get what you can today. Durant was trying to say great nations and great businesses are built by people willing to sacrifice present luxury for a future benefit. It also means nations and businesses and lives fall apart once they get into the hands of quote-unquote soft people. Victor Hugo said, adversity makes men and prosperity makes monsters. So my question to you is, how soft are you? When's the last time you went a day without eating? Went camping and slept on the hard ground, or sat down and read a business book without getting up? Went a month without going out to eat? Did 100 push-ups? Or walked to get groceries instead of taking the car? An old Amish farmer once told me, Ty, there are 3 types of people in the world: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who wonder what happened. If you're wondering what happened to your life, there is a simple answer: toughen up. I learned it when I lived for 4 months in New Zealand. I learned to shear sheep to pay for my trip. If the shearers ever heard me complain about the 12-hour days, they would look at me and say, harden up, mate. That's the simple answer. We're all too soft these days. Modern convenience is great, but it comes at an expense. The expense of weakening our will to create, to survive, to build, to dream. The world is on a fast path to reaping the results of luxury gone wild. 50% are diabetic, 60% obesity, and 20% of the world is on depression medication. I'm going to tell you why. It's because of the media. They're trying to sell you something. They sell us convenience in the form of Big Macs and stupid music and cheap clothes with fancy labels on them because they want your money. It's the wealthy using capital to prey on our basic instincts to seek the easy way out. So they build big companies that make frozen dinners in big gulps to fill their pockets at your expense. So remember this: when you're in a room and you don't know who the sucker is, you're the sucker. You never want to be the sucker. Stop being the sucker. You should want life to be a little hard. Like Tom Hanks says, the hard is what makes it great. The world doesn't need 50,000 more Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashians running after the newest Louis Vuitton high heels. It needs 300 Spartans. Spartans embraced being stoics. I was reading about how the Spartans trained their children in Sparta. The students were fed just the right amount for them never to become sluggish through being too full, while also giving them a taste of what it is to not have enough. Compare that to our schools, where we fill up the cafeteria with sugar, fat, salt, and soda. The Spartan had 8 rules for training their children. 1. Spartans had to prove their fitness even as children. 2. Spartan children were placed in a military-style education program. 3. Fighting was encouraged among Spartans. 4. Spartans were expected to be lifelong soldiers. 5. Spartan youths were ritualistically tested. 6. Food was intentionally kept scarce, and poor fitness was cause for ridicule. 7. Spartan men were not allowed to live with their wives until age 30. 8. Surrender in battle was the ultimate disgrace. Sounds crazy, yes. Not something that I would recommend in our day and age, but there is a valuable lesson here. As Shakespeare said, let me embrace thee, sour adversity, for wise men say it is the wisest course. Forget the musicians Drake and Lil Wayne. They're trying to sell you something. YOLO, you only live once, is for suckers. There is a balance. You must find the balance. Maybe it's 1 part convenience, 2 part challenge. Or maybe you're a little softer. Start out 3 parts convenience, 2-part challenge. Whatever balance you choose a little more toughening up. Take a cold shower. Take the stairs, not the elevator. Lift something heavy. Run around the block. Turn off the air conditioning for a day. Read a hard book. Do a hard math problem. Take a martial arts class. Do 100 push-ups. Go a month without buying any fancy clothes. Go a week without any sugar. It won't hurt you. In fact, according to Martin Seligman, the famous happiness psychologist, it will make you a heck of a lot happier. And as Charlie Munger says, it will make you a heck of a lot richer too. So, let me end here. Well, that's fine. That's enough. So, what we're talking about today is this same methodology. I want you to adopt this methodology. And again, it's not to say that you have to forego all present pleasure. Remember, I said it's a balance. Maybe it's 1 to 3, 2 to 3. As you could see, though, the benefit of toughening up, of Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, man, I'm going to go from, he was doing 250-pound squat lifts to going to 1,000. He said the rewards were infinite. It was everything he wanted. Now, we're not talking about bodybuilding, but you get the gist. Apache cold showers. Well, different Indian tribes. The Sioux Indian, I read when I was younger a story where Sioux Indians, they were missionaries, U.S. missionaries in the 1800s. And they were living in South Dakota with these Sioux Indian tribes. And every morning the Sioux mothers would take their children, cut a hole in the ice. And if you know, South Dakota is one of the coldest places in the world in the winter. Open plains, freezing, cold, wind chill. But they would cut a hole in the ice and make their little 2 or 3-year-old children take a bath in the cold water. And this missionary came and he's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? He saw it as torture, right? Why would you do this to your kids? And the mothers just turned around innocently and said, oh, we're teaching them to be brave. Isn't that profound? Even from youthfulness, even in their youth, the Sioux Indians were saying, toughen up. Don't be just an Epicurean living for sensory pleasure, what feels the best. Toughen up. Be stoic. Grit your teeth sometimes. That's stoicism. This is life. And you know what? If you know the story of Little Bighorn or the Indian Wars where the U.S. Army came and were fighting the Indians in the 1860s, 1870s, they said, you know who were brave you didn't want to fight against were those Sioux Indians. When those boys and girls grew up and having been put in that water when they're from a little kid, imagine their neural pathways, imagine the rewiring that had happened in their brain. They were tough. They were tough. They were courageous. You know, there's a story of Sitting Bull, who, the way that the hierarchy and government, so to speak, and leadership worked, there were no leaders in the Sioux Indians. You led by example. So there was obviously always leaders who stood out, but it was only because they earned it. There was no voting. You could change at any moment. If you were following one chief and you didn't like it, you could leave. But people followed Sitting Bull, why he was known as the bravest. There's one great story where there was 1,000 Indians and they were going to attack this fort. And they were over the hill, and the Americans were behind the fort walls, and they had sharpshooting rifles, and they were shooting at the Indians. But the Indians were just out of range. You know, whatever, 500 yards, 200 yards or something. So Sitting Bull would look to his men and say, today's a good day to die. He was brave. There's that famous, I think it was Frederick the Great, the German, looked at his men when they were not wanting to charge in a battle, famous battle. I think it was in the Peasant War, the 7-Year War. And he looked at him and he said, rascals, would you live forever? Saying, toughen up, you're going to die somehow, let's go to war. And Sitting Bull there, centuries later, said the same thing, you know, today's a good day to die. And he showed, led by example. He walked out, he took his pipe, he laid a blanket out in front of those fort, and he smoked a pipe, crossed his legs, and the bullets, of course, the sharpshooter and American soldiers were trying to hit him. Boom, 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 boom. And he sat there and he just showed how brave he was. Slowly, he was stoic, saying, if it's my time, it's my time. I'm and have courage. Red Cloud, who is another fairly courageous person, I mean, more courageous than me, right? I've never gone in front of bullets. He came real fast and smoked real fast the pipe and then got up and left because the bullets. And Sitting Bull slowly did it. Sitting Bull, obviously, I'm not recommending you do something extreme like that. But the point being, tremendous power in business and life and respect will come to you when you're tough. Whether it's being able to put more weight on the weights and saying grit in your teeth. Now, you don't want to hurt yourself, obviously. There's a false economy there. But, you know, what Reg Park said on Schwarzenegger, you're tough enough. Just some of it's just in your head. You know, the 4-minute mile. Nobody could beat that 4-minute mile. And then Roger Bannister finally broke it. And everybody broke it because he was tough enough to realize it was in the mind. Nobody was toughening up enough to do this. Let's grit our teeth and let's do it. Who cares if nobody's done it? I'll be the first. And he did it. And then other people followed. I'm reading this book, Top Dog. It's about amazing book by Poe Bronson and Merriman. And it talks about psychological. So what we're talking about today, 67 Steps, is the new psychological attitude I want you to adopt. Not every moment of every day. There's a time to be soft, and there's a time, you know, when you're nurturing people, children, sick people, elderly, but there's a time to grit your teeth and go, today we go to war. Now, in the modern world, you're probably not going to go to war physically, violently, but you go to war on your problems. You go to war on the adversity of life, whether it be ill health, whether it be betrayal of somebody. It's doing your duty. Now, I talked about Apache cold showers. This is where I got this idea of cold showers, and I recommend, like I wrote there, take a cold shower. I recommend doing every day. I do it. I don't do it 7 days a week, but I do it 4 or 5 times. Before I end my shower, I turn that water as cold as I can. I let the water hit my neck. That's the hardest part. And I yell out, be brave, be brave. And we know for men, it increases testosterone. We know it's healthy for you to do that. Hydrotherapy. Kobe Bryant, the pro basketball player, they're now implementing that for basketball players. You know, this hot, cold. And even if wasn't anything physical, there's something psychological. So you get a double benefit, you know. I call that the Pareto efficiency. When you get a 2 for 1, right? So the Apaches, now another Indian tribe, lived more southwest of the United States. They were known as the toughest people on earth. The toughest. And you know what they did from a little kid or a teenager? They lived in the hottest deserts. They would put water in their mouth, make them run 10 miles, and then spit out all the water. They were teaching them, be tough. So start with some little things. Like I said, do some push-ups. Take the stairs, not the elevator. The reward is large, and the punishment for not doing this is everything you probably don't want to have happen to you. You know, I was talking to Dr. Sharon Molam, wrote the best-selling book Inheritance. He's an MD and a geneticist, and he says, the way your bone structure works, okay, we're all made up of all these bones, a couple hundred bones, is that you have osteoclasts and osteoblasts. They're responsible for basically tearing down your bones and rebuilding them continually. It's always happening. Just like your skin is continually being regenerated, the cells there. And use it or lose it with your bones. That's why people, as they get older, they fall and break a bone because they're not toughening up. If you only swim in a swimming pool where it's lighter than gravity, your bones don't strengthen. But if you play, sport, basketball, or you lift weights, that's why they recommend this. For people, you strengthen, you force the genes to release the enzymes that get those osteoclasts and osteoblasts working. So use it or lose it. That's the penalty of not toughening up. You're really rewiring your brain to have a result that you probably don't want. I don't think many people want to fall and break their bones. I grew up playing basketball, played for many years, but I took a couple years off, got a little lazy with basketball, and I went to play with my friend Jeremy, started playing right away thinking I was the same person I was a couple years before, but as I didn't know then, osteoclast and osteoblast, they hadn't been working, they hadn't been rebuilding. I'd gotten weak, and I would jump for a rebound, and I fell down, and man, I broke my ankle, the bone stuck out there. And I learned, Tai, there's a penalty for not hardening up. I should have played basketball slowly, rebuilt. By jumping up and down, you kind of pound on your bones. You need a little stress, you need a little strain. Now, you can take it to an extreme. Sometimes long-distance runners have tremendous downsides, their joints give out and bones, but to a certain extent. That's why I said you don't have to go too far with this, But the message from society is so soft now, so convenience filled. If we don't have air conditioning, we freak out. And we don't realize that the penalty of not doing some of these things that the Sioux Indians did, or the Apache Indians, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, is that we become weak-willed. And then when time comes when we need our strength, it's not there. Use it or lose it. That's one of the 25 cognitive biases. Senescence, old, growing old. It's not just growing old chronologically, age-wise. It's literally growing old through lack of use. So one of the things that your new mindset needs to become is getting enough toughness to handle the grind of life, okay? The next thing I talked about is, the Spartan whipping post. So we talked a little bit about Sparta. So just think about this analogy. Well, let me first say, the Spartans, they talked about this ritualistically testing people. They would take a random soldier, random boy, for no reason, take him, tie him to a whipping post, and whip him. Not because he did anything wrong, but to toughen him up. And you know what? They would whip him so much that some people would die. They weren't messing around. Now, I'm not advocating that, obviously. It's extreme. But I want to ask you this question. Let's say in life, you found yourself in trouble, physically. You walked out of a restaurant late at night. You're confronted by two big people that seem hostile. And then one of your friends comes out of the restaurant and says, hey, what's going on there? Who would you want coming out of that restaurant? Dainty person, soft hands, soft skin? Or would you want somebody who had a few scars on their face, who took off their shirt and had the whipping scars? You're in a trench like a Spartan and you're going to war. Who do you want next to you? Somebody who survived the whipping post? I do. That's who I want. Forget the soft. Bring me the hard person, the tough person. Now, you and I in life are probably not going to physically need this kind of backup, although you'd be surprised. I read a couple million people in the world, just in the United States, 2 million people I read are assaulted by people. Now, I'm not saying the answer is just to be tough, but when people are looking to assault somebody, physical toughness matters. You leave it, it's the porcupine effect. Porcupine puts a lot of quills on and you leave it alone. Well, in the same way, physically, you should toughen up. But more importantly, because this is not what we're talking about success here, the 67 steps. I want you to change the mentality. I want you to mentally be the equivalent of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not all of us have been gifted physically that we can be 6'5" and 260 pounds of muscle like, whatever Arnold was. But you know what? All of us have the ability to make our mind tough like that. Toughen up. Toughen up. Now, how do you get this? Because I think people generally resonate with what I'm saying. I don't get too many people saying, no, I don't see the value of being tough at all. Most of us you probably had a parent, you fell, you skinned your knee, your dad or mom came over and said, hey, come on, you got to toughen up. There was a process happening. The problem is for most of us, it gets stunted at some point. We become too weak. Maybe it's out of fear sometimes. Maybe it's excessive. If you were excessively bullied, excessively traumatized, sometimes it's hard to recover. I was just reading in that book, Top Dog, how some people are introverts and extroverts. You may be a naturally sensitive person, and I don't want you to get rid of that natural sensitivity. There's nothing wrong with a certain level of sensitivity. In fact, it's not right or wrong. There's some great things that come from sensitivity in the sense that, for example, you might be able to handle, or you might be a better artist. You might be a better nurturer, a better doctor, a better nurse. What I'm saying is on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't want you to be a 2. All right, you got to get yourself up a few points. It's important that you move yourself up a few points, okay? Why? Well, life will throw tremendous heartaches at you. I think everybody knows this. Let me try to find this quote. For all of us, the odds, for example, of having a 3 to 6 month or longer disability, by the time you're 40, it's like 1 out of 3 people. So physically, you will be confronted with adversity. I read Evil Knievel's the stunt guy, his autobiography or his biography, and just the man broke more bones, but he was tough. Now, I hope nobody will become that insane, but there's a certain level of Evil Knievel we all need in us, you know, to break a bone and go, that's life right there. To not freak out. You know, so again, some people are more sensitive than others. You don't need to completely change your personality, but you do need to have a little bit of toughness to you, especially when it comes to success. 7 billion people are competing with you, especially if you're a business entrepreneur. A level of toughness will give you an edge. It will give you a competitive advantage that you will need to get what you want. Life and competition is not a zero-sum game, but make no mistake, there is a level of competition to life. So how can you do this? If we agree that there's validity to this, if we agree that the world has now made us pretty soft. Man, I lived with the Amish for 2.5 years in my early 20s. Boy, I went back years later, and man, I was like, I have gotten so weak. I was like always looking down at my phone, like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? I'm like, wait a second, Ty, are you so weak that you're now this piece of technology owns your brain? Try it. Go without your phone for a day. You'll feel like you're missing something, but in actuality, humans live for generations with no phone. So maybe put your phone away for 2 days. Or give it to someone in case there's an emergency, your wife or coworker. Toughen up there. Tough to me means not reliant on things, crutches, too much. If you have a phone, the phone is the slave and you're the master. When you feel yourself becoming the master, you must take action. Physically, it's okay to use a car, but when the car is the master, one block away, you're having to drive instead of walk. You're losing out physically, health-wise. You're also rewiring your brain to be weak, which is going to hurt you in your love relationships, which is going to hurt you in business, and it's going to lower your happiness. We know this. The great, all the positive psychology research out there says it's through trial and some level of adversity that you're able to push through, that you release more dopamine. So maybe some of you need to stop taking an elevator for a month. I think it was Jeff Bezos I was reading, the Amazon guy. He never used the elevator. You know, I had some employees that worked for me, and after them working for me for a couple of years, I was like, I realize you guys have never, and they all wanted to be entrepreneurs. I was like, I realize you guys have never had a 24-hour day. I have as an entrepreneur. I've had it where I work 24 hours. I've had it where I work 72 hours. Now, you wouldn't want to do that too often. I read that the Guinness Book of World Records, some kid, I think he stayed up 11 days. And the research basically said there was no long-term effect. If you did that often, you would, but the body can recover. So I told these coworkers, I was like, you think it's a big deal when you work 8 hours. I was like, you know what? Next crisis, you're going to be in here working 24 hours at Fix. And they did, and they're happier for it. They're tougher for it. They feel more self-reliant. As we talked about with Martin Seligman, they don't feel like a slave to their environment. What will make you depressed is feeling a slave. So the more things, especially technology, that control you, that you have to have, and as you age, this gets worse. If you age, you're like, I got to have a bed with this exact pillow. It's got to be exactly 62 degrees. Remember when you're young, you just sleep like on the floor. You just fall asleep. But we all get weaker if we're not careful. Not everybody does. Through careful training and mental management, you're going to be able to bypass this weakening. It's my goal for you. I don't want you getting weak. I want you getting tougher. Tougher, tougher, tougher. You must get tougher. And the reward is almost infinite. It's those things that you want. So practicalities, I've talked about some things. I recommend starting with the cold shower. Upping the reliability factor by sticking to this even when you don't want to. Next time you don't want to do something, just do it just to mess with your brain. Just to go, I'm burning out the fat in my brain. You know, everybody wants a six-pack here, and you got to burn off the fat. But burn off some mental fat, and it's just like bodybuilding. If you don't feel a burn, you're probably not lifting heavy enough weight to actually force the muscles to regrow. Remember, Dr. Molan told me, when you lift weights, there's a tearing down, literally, of muscle fiber. and then a rebuilding, right? That's the beauty of life, the cycle. You need the winters of life in order to get to appreciate the spring, summer, and fall. You don't want just fall. You don't want just reaping and plenty. Remember, nations are born stoic and die Epicurean. Nations, lives, families, civilizations die when they become too weak. Your dreams will leave. They will die. They will go to somebody tougher than you. So start with a cold shower. 2 seconds the first day, 2.5 seconds the next day, or even for a week. But in a year, 18 months from now, be able to dive into cold water. I did this at my swimming pool. Man, the first time it was tough, but then I felt the wiring in my brain where I just learned to just dive in. Don't, be brave. If you live near the ocean, especially in California, dive in. Don't do it all the time. Don't stress yourself too much, but slowly, make haste slowly, over 18 months, rewire this brain of yours. Make your brain your master, and you not the master. You not mastered by your brain. I call it being the bitch of your brain. You don't want to be. You don't want it to be controlling you. You want it to be under your control. Other practical things you can do. So we talked about cold showers. We talked about try a day, turn the air conditioner off. Try one day sleeping on the floor on just a cot with no pillow. Again, or maybe just a nap. Try walking instead of taking the elevator. Try carrying your groceries instead of putting them in the cart. Right? Randomly throughout the day, do some push-ups. Start slow. Don't burn yourself out. It needs to be an ESS, an evolutionary stable system. If you do it too much the first time, you'll get so traumatized you'll never do it again. I want you to build slowly. Don't go crazy on your brain. What's some other examples? Camping. For those of you who haven't been camping for a long time, go camping. Get away from some modern convenience. You don't have to do it every week or every month. Do it a couple times a year. Another great one, farm. I've been recommending this to people. Man, go to a farm. These farms are amazing, right? And the good thing about farmers, they always need work. So if you live somewhere where there's farmers, just go out there and volunteer. Make friends. If you're a hard worker, they'll generally be like, sure. Just be like, I'm from the city and I want to toughen up and see what life's like. They usually appreciate that message. Other things. When it comes, and let's go through the 4. These are physical things you can do when it comes to business. When you lose a client, when an experiment you tried in business fails, and you normally would freak out, be like, no, this is like a scar on my back, like the Spartans, and one day it's going to turn me into a warrior. Embrace, be excited. Tony Robbins says, you should be excited when you fail sometimes. Why? He said, because when we prosper, we party. But when we fail, we ponder. So begin to take control of that adversity and go, I failed. But not like most people who then freak out and go back to their day job that they hated. No, learn to embrace that conflict as something that's toughening up. If you're in an argument with somebody, be like, yeah, I like it. Now, again, don't take it to an extreme and become an argumentative person, but just try out of your norm. Now, if you're already a contentious person, maybe you don't need this. Remember, it's all as Aristotle said, it's the balance. You must find the balance. I want you to find the balance. So much of what we're talking about is balancing. If you're already super tough, which I find very rare in the modern world, you might not need this as much. In relationships, let's say you're single and you're like depressed that you can't find somebody. See it as a time where you're toughening up. I'm not a slave to having to be in a relationship, Or if you're lonely, you move to a new town, be like, yeah, this is me toughening up. I'm getting braver, courage. I'm seeking out the adversity instead of shying away from it. Face your fears. I call it Alexander the Great, grading it. I'll tell you an amazing story of it. These guys, Alexander the Great and his dad, Philip, they were tough. Alexander the Great's father, Philip the Macedonian, had an arrow shot in his eye, and he still went to battle. And he had his leg bashed in, and Alexander the Great was famous because in one siege that he did when he was in India, he was going up on a siege tower with all his men, and he got to the top with his 3 bodyguards, but the tower collapsed, and all his reinforcements were gone, and there he was at the top with 3 guys 3 Macedonians, Greeks against all of the enemy, hundreds. What would most people have done? Would you have been tough enough? Most people would have committed suicide, because if they captured him, they would have tortured him. But you know what he did? He faced his fear. He was courageous, like Sitting Bull, like the Apaches, like the little kids diving in the river. And he charged. They couldn't believe it. He threw the enemy was like, wow, is this a trap, an ambush? And his 3 bodyguards ended up dying, and he took an arrow in his shoulder, but it bought them enough time for his men to come over the scaffolding, reinforce, and he won that battle. See, that's the benefit of toughness. You're going to find yourself in life, I'm telling you right now, where that scaffolding is going to fall and all your reinforcements are going to be gone. It's going to be you and maybe a couple other people, and you must have the will to go forward. And when you do, the world will be surprised, and it will give up its rewards and its fruit to you. That's how the world has always been. It's gone to the persistent, and persistent is another word for tough. You must be an investor. You cannot, and I want to talk about this financially, literally and figuratively. When you get some money, don't go out and buy all the stuff that you want. Say, I'm going to be a little tough. I'm going to put some of this money in a savings account on purpose. Even though I have enough in savings, I'm just going to mess with my own brain and toughen that wiring, that weak wiring, that modern Epicurean wire. I'm gonna mess with it. I could buy myself a new car today, but I'm not going to. You know, I've had all kinds of fancy cars, and about a while ago, I sold them all because I was like, Ty, you're getting too reliant on this thing where you got to drive a fancy car. I haven't had a car in quite a while. I, borrow my cousin's car, or I go with people, or I call a taxi, and just toughen up a little bit. I don't want to be the victim, even if I have the money to get a car. I'm not going to do it forever, but I like to exercise. I like to put some scars on my back. And I want you to see scars not in the way that most people see them, as negatives. Okay? They can be negatives if they're because you made a mistake. But what if they're part of a careful methodology and a training that you're doing for your own brain to train yourself to be tougher? Read a hard book. A long book. Do some math program. You might not have done math since high school and you're like, I hate math. Well, that's a good reason to do it. Face your fears. Maybe there's something you've been avoiding doing. Maybe you need to break off a relationship, a friendship, family relationship, and you haven't been afraid of confrontation. Go do it just to toughen up. Right? Joel Salatin used to tell me, when you don't know what to do, do something. Do anything. Oftentimes, a bias towards action is better than nothing. Don't be like the average of people. As the saying goes, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. You don't want to be the masses leading lives of quiet desperation. Face your fears even if you get a scar. Even if you cut yourself. See those scars as a badge. There's an ancient saying which says, silver hair is a badge of honor. And in the same way, experiences, not as long as they're not life-threatening or business-threatening or career-threatening or all, relationship-threatening, you don't want to take it too far because you can really traumatize yourself. You don't want to be like Evel Knievel. He would jump, his jump over Caesar's Tower in the 70s, or Caesar's Fountain in Las Vegas. He missed, or he didn't quite do the jump. He hit the last safety van. He flipped like 100 feet. He broke his pelvis and arm and all this, and then he was out racing again. That's excessive, and I would not recommend that. But I doubt any of you, we live in a pretty soft world. My big concern is someone can take a 10-second cold shower, That's how far we've all come, myself included. We've gotten weak. Get out there on a farm. Get out there on camping. Lift some weights. Lift weights. A University of New Mexico study that I saw, the only thing they found that reversed or stopped aging at a telomere level, the lengthening of your telomeres at the cellular level, was lifting weights. Toughening up with some weights. Do some pull-ups. Do some stuff. We don't need more luxury people. I always say, give me 300 Spartan or even Apache tough people. I'll take over the world. I'd like to do that with you. We're working on this together. I'm reminding myself, Ty, when something's easy, every once in a while, take the long route. If it's a little easier to go up the elevator, just do the stairs just to rewire that brain. Use it or lose it. Don't let the enzyme disappear that are those catalysts to make tough decisions. You look at great people. They went through always toughness. And the good thing is we have the whispers of 10,000 generations, those voices that operate in our subconscious from our genetic wiring that tell us when you pull through the toughness, you feel better about yourself. Joel Salatin used to say, man, my kids, he has 2 kids, Daniel and Rachel, and he's like, they work all the time and they do stuff and they're on the farm. He doesn't overwork them when they were little kids, but you know, they're there. And he says, I see all these kids from the city, and yeah, those kids theoretically on paper should be happier than my kids because they have video games and they have candy and they have this, but we're in a world dying from too much pleasure. And he's like, my kids are 10 times happier. When I live at the Amish, still never seen kids happier than I saw at the Amish. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, they were happy. And they had to toughen up. The parents are like, put your jacket on, it's cold. You gotta go, you know, they're pretty easy on their kids, obviously. You know, I found them to be very wise, but their 5-year-old kid, you know, in the winter, he's got to put his little jacket and walk 10 feet to collect the eggs from the 5 eggs from the chickens and bring them back. And David Chubb would be like, oh, I have to go out there, Mom. And Mom's like, go get the eggs. You know, they weren't making him work 8-hour slave factory, you know, like England in industrial age. It wasn't like that, but they're like, go out there, do your little thing, get the eggs. Took them 5 minutes. Of course, when you're a kid, 5 minutes seems like 100 years. But they were toughening up the child. I've never seen such hard workers. I've never seen happier people. Like I said, Jared Diamond in Guns, Germs, and Steel said his research on the Amish, they were 5 times less, or they had 1/5 of the depression. In the modern world, depression comes from feeling like you're a victim, you're trapped. Luxury will trap you. Wendell Berry talks about this. If you ever know what have you ever heard of a Luddite? Luddites are people that are anti-technology, and you know, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not pro or anti that much. I look at it and go, does this give me the effect I want? Okay, some technology does, and some doesn't. That's how I look at it. It's a very ambivalent or more analytical approach, and the Luddites bring up valid points. They're like, technology always starts out as the slave, but you eventually turn into its slave. So maybe turn off the computer for a week. Turn the TV off for a week. Turn off all the salt and sugar and fat. You'll be okay. Just eat enough that you're getting your nutritional requirements. I mean, again, I don't want to go through the whole thing. If you have some health issues, talk to a doctor first. But assuming you're healthy, assuming you're cleared by your doctor, cut out the junk. Don't, reward yourself. There was a bodybuilder diet in the 60s or 70s, I forget the name, where it was like Monday through Friday, eat very well, and then Saturday and Sunday, do whatever you want. At least start there. Start there. Start little. Start small. Slowly rewiring. Step by step, you get ahead, but not necessarily in fast spurts. That's Charlie Munger. Grind that out. Toughen up. All right? So here's my question for you. Homework here. In what area, health, wealth, love, or happiness, have you gotten the weakest? Maybe it's your body. Maybe it's in business. Maybe it's in love life that you're like dependent on somebody. Oh, what if they leave you? Like, you've gotten so soft that you don't realize you'll be okay if you're alone. Maybe it's in happiness or doing things for other people. The 4th pillar of the good life. Which of those is your biggest weakness now? What's a simple practical step you can take for the rest of the 67 days that or the rest of the days that you're in this? You're already somewhat in it, but the remaining days, what can you do to slowly rewire the brain? That's what the 67 days is about. So leave a note here, a simple one publicly. It's not public, but it's for the other people in the program. There's a social value. And then I want you to write that out in your journal, a little more detailed, 4 or 5 sentences. All right? Be tough. Nations are born stoic, die Epicurean. We want to be born, be strong. We want to regenerate. We want to live. We want to save civilization. We want to save ourselves. We want to save our loved ones and those who rely on us. Entrepreneurs will save the world, but it will be stoic entrepreneurs. There's a balance. Don't go to the excess now and always be toughen up. Take time to enjoy the moment. But invest in the future. As I talked about, investors, make the most money. The largest category of billionaires, if you look at the 404 or 450 self-made billionaires in the world, the largest category, like 77 of them, are investors, meaning they're stoic. They could spend the money today, spend it later. I read the story of the billionaire, what's his name? The guy who does French fries, Simplot from Idaho. And he said in marbles, you have your marble that you can hit the other marbles. It's called the TAW, T-A-W. And he said, never spend your TAW, because once that's gone, you have nothing to invest. So as an investor, you got to keep some. By toughening up financially, keep some money in saving. You get rid of that, you have nothing to invest when the moment comes. When the time is there, and the rainy day, as John Wooden says, prepare for it, because it will come. But when you're tough, when you've got a little bit more Spartan element, got a few scars on your back mentally, good ones, helpful ones, functional ones, you'll be prepared to meet life. You'll feel more in control. You'll be more likely to get success. You'll feel happier. So leave that note here. If you have any questions, private inbox me, but better to leave it here on the question and answers. Reply back and forth with other people, but write it, pen and paper, in your private 67 steps journal as well. So stay strong, stay tough, take a cold shower, do some push-ups, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much.